I knew something was wrong the second Leon didn't answer my 8:17 a.m. Slack ping. He was never late, never off, never anything less than surgically precise. That man had the uptime of a Swiss watch and the emotional bandwidth of a brick wall, which in a company like Nexora meant people forgot he was human. I used to joke that if Leon ever died at his desk, it would take 6 weeks and a server meltdown before anyone noticed. Turns out I was wrong. It only took 1 week, and half our platform lighting itself on fire. But that's later. Let me take you back. Leon Porter, back-end engineer, 41 years old, looked like the kind of guy who drank black coffee out of an old NASA mug and probably read Linux forums for fun. No Twitter, no flair. Just him, his code, and a rubber wristband that said stability over hype. He wasn't loud, never joined the happy hour Zooms, he didn't showboat in the meetings. Hell, half the new hires thought he was some legacy contractor we hadn't offboarded yet. They'd ask me things like, "What does Leon even do?" And I'd laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was suicidal not to know. Leon didn't write code. Leon built silence. The kind that made our dashboards boring, our weekends uninterrupted, and our investors calm. You didn't notice his work because it worked, always. Our data sync engine, that was him. Our uptime failovers that made us look like tech gods during Black Friday traffic spikes, Leon. The way our client activity reports stayed blazing fast, even when half the country was snowed in and the other half was buying junk at 4 a.m., him again. He was the invisible net under a very stupid circus. But when the new CTO came in, Alec, Mr. Move Fast, Break Better, he didn't see value in quiet. He saw bloat. Hey, real quick, while we're diving into the belly of this disaster, do us a favor. Tap that like button and subscribe. It tells the team we're not yelling into the void. 97% of folks listen without subscribing, but if you're here, you're clearly one of us. Support helps us keep stories like this alive. Thanks. Now back to Leon. You could feel the shift when Alec took over. All of a sudden, metrics were more important than mechanisms. Flash over foundation. He called a meeting his first week and said, "If you can't measure it in engagement, it doesn't matter." Leon looked at me, said nothing, but I could tell his brain had already started packing. 2 weeks later, Alec gave a speech about sunsetting redundant legacy systems. That was his code for, fire the people who make me feel dumb. And Leon made him feel real dumb. During one meeting, Leon quietly offered to walk the team through the rollback protocol if we ever had a multi-region sync failure. Alec waved him off like he was a janitor offering plumbing advice. I remember the exact words. "Thanks, but no one's going to notice if we swap out some back-end folks. You guys are like duct tape. Necessary but replaceable." I bit my tongue so hard it bled. Leon didn't even flinch. He just nodded, jotted something down, walked out of the room with that same slow, almost monk-like calm that made him unreadable. He didn't rage, didn't push back, didn't even tweet about it. That was the worst part. Watching someone who held the company together get treated like an outdated plugin, and then just accept it. But he didn't. Not really. You see, Leon was a lot of things. Quiet, meticulous, maybe even a little bitter in the way people get when they know their worth and watch the world ignore it. But above all, Leon was ready. For years, he'd layered systems with silent checks and undocumented protocols. Not to sabotage, Leon wasn't that guy, but because he believed in fail-safes, in control, in keeping chaos locked behind 27 contingency gates. He didn't expect anyone to maintain them but him, and he knew damn well what would happen if someone tried. So when Alec finally laid him off during the Q3 strategic reorg, Leon didn't argue, didn't delete anything, didn't leave a snarky note in the code base. He packed a single manila envelope, nodded to the HR rep, and walked out like it was any other Wednesday. He wasn't angry, he was finished. And Nexora? Nexora was about to find out what happens when duct tape gets up and walks away. You ever see a man get professionally gutted in under 5 minutes with a smile and a PowerPoint? That was the meeting where Alec Darien first made it clear who he thought counted around here, and who didn't. Freshly poached from some VC-flavored fintech startup that burned bright and died dumber, Alec walked into Nexora like Moses descending from Mount Disruption, armed with buzzwords, teeth whitener, and zero respect for anything older than his gym shorts. He renamed departments before he learned people's names, reorganized teams with the subtlety of a bar fight, and when he finally looked Leon's way, he didn't see a quiet architect who kept the spine of the platform intact. He saw legacy bloat. That was the exact phrase. Legacy bloat. Like Leon was digital cholesterol. The meeting was supposed to be a roadmap alignment. Cross-functional liaisons, core infra updates, all that jazz. Leon had a full deck prepped, his first presentation in hell maybe 4 years. I'd seen him the night before, mumbling to himself over bullet points in the break room, polishing every slide like it was a damn gemstone. It was his one shot to finally explain the spaghetti of undocumented systems and what would happen if someone yanked the wrong thread. He wasn't angling for applause, just awareness. Alec never even let him plug in. "No offense, Leon," he said, flipping through his own deck of strategic realignments, all icons and pastel circles. "But this isn't really the time for a deep dive into code fossils. We're trying to move forward." Leon just sat there, still, chin tucked, slide clicker motionless in his hand. Then Alec turned to the room, grinning like a quarterback at homecoming, and said it. "Honestly, we've got some smart people here, real forward thinkers. No one's gonna notice if a couple back-end guys slip through the cracks. That's the beauty of modularization." The room chuckled. Not all of them, but enough. I remember watching Leon's face. Nothing moved. But I swear I could hear the steel door of his patience groaning shut. He didn't fight, didn't defend himself, just clicked off his laptop, placed the unopened USB drive next to his water cup, and leaned back like he'd been expecting this since the day Alec swaggered through the doors. And the worst part? He was right to expect it, because Alec didn't just dismiss Leon. He made it policy. Within a week, he launched Operation Fresh Stack, his campaign to sunset fragile, undocumented legacy dependencies and build future-ready teams, which, if you spoke fluent corporate passive aggression, translated to, "Fire anyone I don't understand." Leon was at the top of the list. Alex started pulling newer devs into side meetings, asking loaded questions about process opacity and team scalability. Never said Leon's name, but it hung in the air like battery acid. And these kids, fresh out of boot camps, still drunk on startup Kool-Aid, they nodded along like good soldiers. They didn't know that the API wrapper they use daily to fake load balancing across regions was written by the same guy Alec was actively ghosting in sprint meetings. Meanwhile, Leon kept showing up, kept writing code, kept cleaning up the errors that Alec's forward thinkers made every time they tried to patch their way around his infrastructure. He'd leave polite comments in PRs. "This function is rate limited based on LP failover conditions. See internal doc 2019 for details." No one ever read them. They just merged and moved on. I asked him once, late one Friday when we were the only two left in the office, why he didn't just push back. He sipped his cold coffee, eyes on the terminal screen, and said, "You can't make someone see architecture if they think they're living in a pop-up tent." The next week, he submitted a formal request to present the core systems roadmap during Q3 planning. Denied. Alex scribbled a note in the margin of the approval form. Too granular, not strategic leadership material. That's when Leon stopped asking. But don't mistake silence for surrender. He didn't check out. He started counting. Which scripts were being run without fallback logic? Which update cycles now bypassed system health checks? Which parts of his code were being copied, rewritten, and broken by people who thought refactor meant delete the warning labels? He didn't say it out loud, but I knew Leon was documenting the real roadmap now, and it didn't include Nexora. It happened on a Thursday, which felt appropriate somehow, too far from the start of the week to fight it, too close to Friday for anyone to care. The whole floor smelled like boxed Thai from someone's lunch and desperation from everyone else. I was in a metrics alignment call when I saw Leon walk past the glass-walled conference room with an HR rep trailing behind him like a mall cop who'd lost the will to chase. No security escort, no shouting, just that awful, slow walk people do when they're still processing the insult and their brain hasn't caught up with the burn. By the time I got back to my desk, his name was grayed out in Slack. Just a line of cold pixels under his profile. Last active. 10:03 a.m. I don't know why, but that timestamp punched me in the gut harder than any goodbye ever could. Apparently, they'd called him into a quick check-in that morning. No one warned him. No pre-meeting on the calendar. Just a casual ambush in HR with a legal observer and a beige folder already printed with his name. When he sat down, Alec was already there. Legs crossed, elbow draped over the back of the guest chair like this was just a quarterly review and not a pre-dug grave. "We're letting you go," Alex said. No warmth, No hesitation, just efficient human offloading. HR slid him the exit packet like it was a menu. Inside, a generic thank you card printed with appreciation in a font so dull it practically apologized for existing. Not signed, not addressed, just factory ink and faux sentiment. Leon turned it over, flipped through the packet, never blinked. Alec leaned forward like a man who loved the sound of his own dismissals and said, "You'll land somewhere, eventually, but we're moving toward a more agile model, you understand." Leon nodded once. Didn't argue, didn't ask why, didn't remind anyone that he'd single-handedly stabilized the Q1 client load surge that saved our renewal rate. Didn't mention that his fallbacks had prevented a full system outage last month when some shiny new hire typoed a load balancer path into oblivion. He just reached for his bag. The same beat-up canvas thing he always carried, frayed at the strap, stitched like someone who didn't trust the world not to fall apart at the seams. He pulled out a sealed manila envelope. Thick, labeled in his handwriting, LP Core, internal only. That was it. No flash drive, no vengeance, just one envelope. Inside it, I later learned, was the only copy of his system's documentation. Written entirely in a notation only Leon understood. Not encrypted, not hostile. Just foreign. The kind of thing that required not just reading, but knowing. And Alec didn't know squat. As Leon stood to leave, Alec tried one last smirk, that smug, oily grin that people use when they're too stupid to know they're holding a grenade with the pin halfway out. "You know, no offense," Alec said, adjusting his cufflink, "but no one really noticed what you did here." Leon turned his head, just enough to look him in the eye. He didn't raise his voice, didn't sneer, just said, calm as a pastor at a funeral, "That's the point." Then he walked out. No goodbyes, no locker to clean, no email blast or department Slack farewell. Just a quiet exit, one slow step at a time, down a hallway lined with people too busy refreshing dashboards to realize that the reason those dashboards even loaded was leaving the building. I didn't see him again after that, not at first. But the thing about invisible people, when they vanish, the silence they leave behind gets loud. Day 7. That's how long it took. 7 days after Leon walked out the front doors without a word, our dashboard started bleeding red like a Christmas tree in cardiac arrest. At first, it was subtle. A minor alert on the East Coast load balancer. One of the DevOps guys shrugged it off, called it anomaly blip. By noon, it had escalated to a 503 storm across 2 data centers. By 3 p.m., our auto-scaling logic, usually as smooth as silk, refused to trigger under stress. We were flying blind into a full-blown cluster stall, and no one knew why. Clients started pinging support with things like, "Why are my scheduled data exports reverting to last week's version?" And, "Is your uptime guarantee still valid?" That's when Alex strutted in with his Red Bull and bravado, looked at the chaos on the traffic monitor, and asked the most Alec question imaginable. "Has anyone checked the legacy junk Leon built?" He actually said junk. While the system choked on its own traffic and rolled back an entire sync job for our largest retail client, he stood there like a clueless chef yelling at the stove for burning water. I wanted to scream. Here's what really happened. Leon's code was the glue between the paint. He didn't just write back-end modules, he built behavioral guardrails, little logic nests that only kicked in when things went sideways, silent rerouting systems, recursive fallback paths, predictive scaling triggers that adapted to abnormal latency spikes, the kind of stuff you don't know is working until it's gone. And guess what? It was gone. Not because Leon deleted it, he didn't, but because the modernization team, Alec's term for his army of weekend certificate architects, had started swapping out modules without understanding the dependencies. They'd overwritten 2 core scheduling scripts and stubbed out a dynamic cache invalidation job that Leon had wrapped in a wrapper, like some Russian nesting doll of foresight. Now that wrapper was rejecting data pushes with obscure flags like youth chain decay and sync reject fallback. No documentation, no comments, just deeply intentional code that assumed, rightly, that only one person ever needed to understand it. And that person was gone. Alec refused to believe it was the system itself fighting back. "It's technical debt," he barked at the war room. "We're paying the price for old code nobody cleaned up." But the engineers weren't so sure. I could see it in their eyes. They weren't loyal to Leon, necessarily. They just knew better. They'd opened up his modules, trying to trace back why the traffic reroute logic had split an inbound query across 3 dead endpoints. What they found wasn't rot. It was architecture. Protective, responsive, adaptive logic, not written to fail, written to warn, and now it was screaming. We lost 2 clients that day, not huge ones, but loud enough to rattle the sales team. A few of us tried to quietly escalate. One engineer found a subroutine tagged LP override safe, a legacy flag that, when removed, caused the system to bypass sync verification altogether and trash half a backup. We brought it to Alec. He didn't even blink. Remove anything with LP in the tag. That's not scalable. We're redoing it all anyway. I swear the air in that room dropped 10 degrees. Someone joked later that the only thing keeping Nexora afloat was the ghost of Leon's paranoia. But it wasn't paranoia. It was planning. And Alec had just fired the only man who knew how to feed the damn ghost. That night, the call center lit up. One of our Tier 1 enterprise clients, a law firm with 0 tolerance for data delay, called screaming about missing billing records. Alec, sweating through his Patagonia vest, told them we'd patch it in post. They didn't laugh. A few hours later, I saw Alec pacing outside in the dark, phone to his ear, muttering, "No, it's not catastrophic, just inherited complexity." His hand was shaking. He wouldn't admit it, but the cracks were spreading fast, and under the floorboards was Leon's quiet genius, now abandoned and reacting exactly how it was designed to, by rejecting the unworthy. I watched the monitor blink retry failed over and over again, and for the first time, I didn't feel anxious. I felt something almost like justice. The breakthrough came during a 2 a.m. triage call that should have been a code review but felt more like an archaeological dig. The DevOps team had been pulling 12-hour shifts trying to patch the platform together with metaphorical chewing gum and emotional exhaustion when Junior, our newest SRE hire fresh out of a Cloud Cert bootcamp, muttered the phrase that cracked the surface. "Hey, what the hell is LP reroute.sys?" Silence. 4 engineers froze, coffee halfway to their mouths, as if he'd just read aloud from a cursed tomb. I was on mute, sitting in the dark, clutching my mug like it was a crucifix. I knew that name. I'd seen it once in a terminal window on Leon's screen, asked him what it meant. He'd just smiled and said, "Safety net for when things get stupid." Turns out, we'd reached stupid. LP reroute.sys wasn't some throwaway namespace or deprecated module. It was the shadow spine of our failover logic, and it was everywhere. Buried inside it were custom-built, condition-based triggers, each with its own logic tree, error thresholds, and diagnostic handshake routines. These weren't scripts, they were responses. Quiet, precise little watchdogs that monitored our services and decided when the platform was allowed to trust itself. Every trigger condition was unique, every exit route tangled. No 2 failure modes handled the same way. It was like Leon had built a dynamic immune system. And now, with him gone, the body was rejecting its transplants. Alec, of course, brushed it off when the engineers tried to escalate. "These legacy wrappers are choking the system," he snapped during a morning sync. "We're not here to worship code, we're here to modernize it." To his credit, he almost sounded convinced, but the logs told a different story. Over the next 48 hours, the DevOps team started isolating update failures. The culprit? A flood of system flags that read like passive-aggressive post-it notes from the back-end gods. Integrity missing. Chain verification denied. LP override disabled. Not one of them malicious. Not one of them dangerous. Just immovable. They weren't breaking the system. They were holding it hostage in perfect, unwavering logic. If the platform couldn't prove its data was clean, LP reroute.sys wouldn't let it sync. If the update didn't include a recursive integrity check, it was throttled to 0 throughput. And worst of all, there was no documentation, just cryptic code comments like "better safe than bankrupt." By Friday, performance metrics were tanking, page load times up 32%, query latency through the roof. And then came the email, subject, Q2 stability concerns, from Ashwin Cole, lead partner, Tilden Crest Capital, to Alec Darian, CTO, Nexora, Sikasi, board distribution, 3 lines. "We've noticed a performance decline across the core platform. Can you provide clarity on the architectural changes introduced this quarter?" Alec didn't reply right away. He called a meeting instead. Cameras on, eyes tired, voices strained. "The investors are asking questions," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "We need to get this under control. Cut out the legacy triggers. Anything under LPR reroute.sys is obsolete." But no one moved, because by then, the engineers knew. This wasn't legacy, this was a living structure. Defensive, responsive, maybe even protective in ways Alec would never understand. Pulling it out would be like removing a skeleton because it was getting in the way of dancing. So they didn't pull it. They tiptoed around it, tried to appease it, like it was something sacred or sentient. Meanwhile, somewhere off screen, Leon was quiet, not gloating, not meddling, just letting the system he built do what it was always meant to do, withstand stupidity. And now, as error logs kept flooding in and every new patch was rejected with that same digital deadpan, integrity missing, I realized something chilling. Leon hadn't written code for people. He'd written it for the system itself, and the system had chosen a side. The quarterly investor call was supposed to be routine, a boring, scripted dance of charts, acronyms, and empty promises, a place where Alec could preen and puff about forward momentum, while the rest of us prayed nothing caught fire mid-slide. But not this time. This time, the tone was different before the first word even landed. The moment the call started, I heard the sharpness in Cole's voice, the kind of voice that's already made decisions but is politely letting you squirm first. "Before we get into the numbers," he said, interrupting Alec's over-caffeinated intro, "we've noticed some irregularities." You could hear Alec freeze. "Platform reliability metrics have dipped significantly," Cole continued, like he was reading a death sentence off a post-it, "and 3 of your enterprise clients are now reporting degraded performance. Would you care to explain what's happening on the back end?" Alec shifted in his seat, camera on, sweat starting to collect just past his temples. Yes. We're in the middle of transitioning away from certain legacy systems that were problematic in terms of transparency and scalability. There were bugs, deep ones, that we've begun to flush out." "Bugs?" Cole repeated flatly. "Yes, inherited issues, mostly undocumented. We've traced several of the failures to code written by previous staff who..." "You mean Leon Porter?" Silence. That name hit the Zoom call like a brick through stained glass. Alec's jaw tensed. He blinked a little too fast. "Leon was part of the older architecture team," he managed to say. But your platform was stable when he was here," Cole cut in. "Now it's not." And then came the final blow, delivered with the kind of deadpan that only a bored billionaire could manage. "Maybe you shouldn't have fired your legacy." The rest of the call blurred into stammered numbers and hollow pivots. Alec tried to steer the conversation back to projections and retention initiatives, but it was over. The scent of blood was in the water. No one cared about his rebrand strategy when clients were reporting timeouts and failed syncs. Everyone could see it now. Performance was decaying, the code base was fighting itself, and the only person who had understood it was gone. Except, he wasn't really gone. Leon had resurfaced, not loudly, not with lawsuits or LinkedIn rants, just a quiet footnote in a Stratosphere press release. "We're thrilled to welcome a veteran systems architect to help drive the next-gen backend evolution of our core SaaS infrastructure. No name, no photos. But those of us who knew, we knew. And if any doubt lingered, it vanished when a key client Nexora had been courting for 6 months announced a sudden pivot to Stratosphere." Technical leadership was their official reason. I read that line 3 times. It was code. The kind of code Leon would have admired. He was rebuilding it, all of it. A cleaner version, a smarter version, without the noise, without the ego, just the logic, just the bones. I heard, through an ex-colleague now working under him, that he didn't even discuss Nexora, didn't speak Alec's name, didn't brag. He just sat down in a second-hand chair at a modest office, rolled up his sleeves, and started diagramming from scratch. Meanwhile, Alec paced holes into the carpet. He called last-minute strategy syncs and demanded code red flags for any commit with LP prefixes. He told PR to downplay client churn and issued canned statements about data migration bottlenecks. But the investors weren't buying it, and neither were we, because the more he talked, the more obvious it became. Leon hadn't left chaos. He'd just stopped catching the knives, and now Alec was bleeding on the floor, trying to blame the bandage. That night, I found myself rewatching the investor call, frame by frame. Right at the moment Alex says legacy bugs, you can see his eyes flick to the corner of the screen. Like he expects someone, maybe Leon himself, to appear. But Leon didn't need to. The silence was enough. The kind of silence that only comes after years of doing things the right way, in a room full of people who never noticed. Until now. The email leaked on a Tuesday. not through corporate sabotage or some dramatic whistleblower moment, just a forwarded thread. A former Nexora engineer, probably exhausted and sick of watching Alex spin garbage into gold, had replied to a worried client with a single honest line. Leon Porter wrote 80% of the real-time sync stack. No one else understood it like he did. That was it. One sentence. No malice, just tired truth. And it spread like fire on dry code. Within hours, the client, an enterprise logistics giant with SLA clauses that could bankrupt us if tripped, forwarded that thread back to Nexora's support line. The subject line was blunt. Urgent. Escalation path. Stability inquiry, and right there, third bullet down. We'd like to speak directly with Mr. Porter. Not Alec, not your DevOps liaison, him. Alec didn't take it well. He tried to laugh it off at first, like it was a fluke. They're just nervous. Leon was a crutch. We've got newer systems coming online. But then came the notice. Formal, legal, dry as dust, and 10 times heavier. Intent to suspend platform contract due to degraded service and architectural concerns. The client wasn't threatening. They were done. And worse, they'd CC'd 3 other clients in the same industry vertical, like it was a chain letter or a warning shot. Suddenly, Alec wasn't just dealing with performance bugs, he was dealing with credibility rot. Behind the scenes, I heard he made a few quiet calls to board members, to his old mentor, to an exec at Stratusware asking if there was any chance Leon would be open to a temporary consult. He didn't say it out loud, but we all knew what was coming next. Begging season. Meanwhile, Stratusware made their move. No billboard, no bluster. Just a polished, under 2-minute video on LinkedIn. A new chapter begins. We're thrilled to welcome an industry veteran architecting our next-gen data architecture platform. Faster, smarter, built for resilience from the first line of code. No name, but the architecture diagrams, the way the data sync arrows moved, anyone with a half-baked understanding of Nexora's backend could see the fingerprints. Leon was back. Not here, not loud, not even vengeful, just visible again. The clients noticed. Fast. 2 more inquiries hit Nexora's support portal demanding clarity on who maintains the original sync architecture. One even cited the leaked email directly, writing, "Is Mr. Porter still affiliated with your engineering team? If not, please confirm where he is currently employed for future consideration." Alec flipped. He called an all-hands emergency. Said the leak was a breach of internal cohesion. Threatened terminations for anyone talking to clients outside the chain of command. But the more he yelled, the more fragile he looked. It was like watching a CEO scream at a mirror, hoping it'll crack first. We all knew what was happening. Leon hadn't just built the backbone of our system. He'd earned trust. The kind that couldn't be bought, spun, or replaced with a half-baked Jira sprint and a trendy tech stack. And now the clients wanted him. Not the brand, not the logo, not Alec's PowerPoints. Just the man who made things work. I checked Stratusware's website again that night. The splash page had changed. Subtle, like always. Built on trust. Scaled through silence. We know what matters. It didn't say Leon's name. It didn't have to, because by now everyone knew. The quiet guy they kicked to the curb, he was the platform. The rest of it, just noise. Alec was gone by Monday. No tearful farewell, no Slack emoji parade, just a brisk 3-line internal memo from legal and an unceremonious profile deletion. 1 minute he was TO. The next, he was an empty chair and a string of login errors. The board had finally had enough. Of the outages, the excuses, the vanishing clients, and the last straw. A $30 million client gone in under 48 hours, citing loss of technical confidence. That one hurt. Nexora's stock slipped 14% before lunch. By the end of the day, it was trending on the forums. Nexora's silent collapse. How one layoff triggered a sync storm. Inside the office, morale cratered. Engineers whispered in corners. Support teams braced for the next churn. Marketing stopped scheduling webinars. There was no spinning it anymore. Everyone knew the ghost in the machine had left, and now the whole structure was cracking like ice in spring. And so, inevitably, they turned to Leon. The same man Alec had dismissed. The same man they'd ignored in meetings, denied documentation time, and dropped without ceremony. Now they wanted him back. Not as an apology, of course. They weren't that evolved. It was strategic. calculated. A senior technical advisor role wrapped in all the corporate niceties, remote flexibility, project autonomy, a handsome package with equity vesting to reflect his legacy contributions. The subject line of the email read, "A new chapter together." Leon didn't reply. He didn't even hesitate, because at that exact moment he was in a Zoom call, camera off, voice calm, finalizing the onboarding for the same client Nexora had just lost. The deal was clean, efficient. The CTO on the other end smiled like a man who'd just survived a storm and found the architect of the lighthouse. Leon answered questions before they were asked, explained things without dumbing them down, walked through his new stack like he was painting a quiet cathedral. And when the client asked gently if he had any thoughts about Nexora's collapse, Leon didn't gloat. He just said, "Systems reflect their leadership. Ours will be different." When the call ended, he muted, leaned back, and stared at the inbox. There it was again. A new chapter together. He clicked it open. Read it once, twice, and then he highlighted the whole thing and hit delete. No reply, no thank you, no parting shot. Just an empty inbox, a quiet office, and a cup of cold coffee sweating next to a draft for his new systems manual. Out the window, Stratosphere's small parking lot was half full. Nothing flashy, no Teslas. Just a line of beat-up sedans and one guy outside in a hoodie eating lunch on a bench. It was the kind of place that didn't need to be loud to be powerful. Leon smiled to himself. He didn't need revenge. He had relevance. He didn't need to return. He'd already arrived. The next investor meeting was hushed in a way I hadn't heard before. No banter, no smug confidence, not even the nervous clatter of keyboard typing behind fake note-taking. Just that thick, uncomfortable silence that wraps around a room after everyone's realized the obvious too late. Halfway through the meeting, after a desperate slide about restored confidence metrics and a laughable pivot toward AI automation as our new growth focus, it happened. A junior analyst from Farbridge Partners, the kind who usually just nods and takes notes, looked up, cleared her throat, and said quietly, "Maybe someone did notice when he left." The room didn't even shift. No one laughed. No one dared, because we all knew who she meant. No name needed, no dramatics, just the sentence, hanging in the air like smoke after a fire, the kind of smoke that settles in your clothes and memory and won't come out, no matter how many times you wash. There wasn't much left to say after that. The board shuffled past the point of pretense, and even the CEO, freshly repackaged as acting product lead, couldn't muster his usual energy. Someone tried to refocus the discussion on Q4 salvage strategies, but it was like handing out mops on the Titanic. Outside the meeting, the article had already started circulating. Not through PR, not from any formal announcement, just shared, reposted, relinked until it was everywhere. The Quiet Architect, how one layoff sparked a platform exodus. No photo, no pull quotes. Just a slow, methodical dive into the infrastructure collapse at Nexora, the cascading sync failures, the client migration to Stratosphere, and the man whose systems once made the impossible look routine. They never said his name. But they didn't need to, because everyone knew. I saw it in the group chats, in the LinkedIn comments, in the way engineers from rival firms tagged each other beneath the story with a single word: respect. Leon never responded publicly. No press tour, no think piece. No "I told you so" thread. He didn't need vindication from headlines. He'd already written his legacy in uptime logs and code no one could break without him. The kind of legacy that doesn't get applause. It gets remembered. And that's the thing. They said no one would notice when he left. Everyone did.